Today we are talking about, there's a handful of people that are known as like some of the most well-known alleged UFO alien encounter people in the world. Travis Walton would be one of them. I guess abductees too. Like he'd be an abductee.
Yeah.
Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah.
One of the other ones is a guy named Christopher Bledsoe.
Senior.
And if it happens to make it to production someday, he's actually, I based the main character in this script that I'm writing recently on him. That's how much I liked his story. Yeah. It's not exactly, but I took a lot of maybe his persona and wrote it into the character of this script for the show. Mm-hmm. And show is about UFOs. Big surprise. So he's got a crazy story with lots of, I mean, he's been doing this for like 15, 20 years, like being public about having an encounter. At this point, many encounters with what he, some sort of entity that he doesn't know what it is, or he has some ideas about what it might be, but he's one of those guys that he's been on the History Channel. He's been on Fox News. He's probably not been on CNN. I don't know. They don't do as much UFO stuff. He's been out there. He's a guy that in the UFO world, if you say the name Chris Bledsoe, a lot of people know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Did you know who he was before I suggested him?
No, not before. If you are not familiar with Chris Bledsoe and you get into researching him, it can be a little bit obtuse at first, because you'd think for as public as he's been for especially the last couple of years, he would tell stories in a more linear way. But he's kind of matter of fact about everything that he's telling you about. So seeing orbs of light, that's unusual. That doesn't happen to most people. And then in the middle of when he's talking about that, he drops that he's a commercial pilot. And okay, well, not everybody's a commercial pilot. And then he talks about, his first wife died and he discovered the car wreck and she died in his arms, and you're kind of like, but he completely blows right past that while he's talking about orbs of light. So or being shot with a shotgun at age 10. It's another one of the notes.
Miraculously surviving.
Yeah. Getting poisoned by his doctor. I mean, he's got all of these little unusual anecdotes that he kind of mentions in passing while he's talking about his relationship with these orbs of light. And I think, if nothing else, he's had a pretty unusual life. And he sure says it in such a non-fantastic way that I think, well, he doesn't seem rehearsed and polished, I guess, is one thing to say about him that makes him credible.
Yeah, and the other thing about him is it's not just him. His whole family is wrapped up in it.
Right.
So his son has a podcast called Bledsoe Said So, and has been, he has several sons, but one of them very public and very, much, he was on the Danny Jones podcast after Chris was on, and is very public with it. And I think his other son is sometimes public, but definitely not as much. And his daughter is involved, but not just like they're telling his stories. I think the interesting thing about Bledsoe Senior is you can get on his Instagram page right now, and pretty much every other day he's posting videos of orbs showing up in his backyard. And he doesn't strike me as a VFX kind of guy.
Definitely not.
I don't think that and they're very, it's just a cell phone. He's just take out his cell phone and you go, look, he'll point it at and the weird thing is, some of it's not that spectacular. Most of it's not that spectacular. Yeah. It's like he'll point it at the tree line in his backyard, and you'll see some balls of light kind of flare up and then disappear and then flare up, and he's, talking to him and doing his thing. It is strange if you think about it. What is that? What are those lights? And it goes way back to the first encounter he had, I think in 2007 is when it all started. his story, if you listen to him tell it, probably I'd say Danny Jones' podcast is the best version of it. I've heard him give it on a few, but if you want a real long, in-depth, him telling the story from beginning to end, that's the best way to go. But he had a lot of problems. He had a, successful business, everything collapsed, taken away. And then he ends up going fishing with his son and some friends.
Yep.
And in the course of that fishing trip is wandering in the woods, kind of depressed and, praying / kind of, what am I going to do, God, kind of thing. And these 3 huge orbs of light show up and freak him out. And there's a whole, you can listen to his whole story on it. I mean, I'm just giving you like the broad strokes, but he basically is, lost some time. He ends up, hiding from these orbs of light. They're massive. He thinks it's the sun. It's so bright. He thinks it's the sun. And then when he gets closer to it, he realizes it's not the sun because the sun is over there and this is over here. And eventually,
and there's more than one of them.
And then there's more than one. And he eventually makes his way back to the camp and they're freaking out. These other guys, because they're like, where have you been? He's like, I was just down the street. And they're like, you've been gone for hours. We've been looking everywhere for you. And he's like, I was just 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
And then his son is missing at that point because his son had gone looking for him.
Right.
So it's a long night of chasing orbs and looking for each other.
Yeah, chasing orbs, searching down the sun, and then finding that the orbs now are chasing him. They all load up in the truck. Making a run for it. And at some point, one of the orbs is just a few feet above the sunroof of his truck. And so when you talk about his family members are all giving accounts of things that have happened.
And friends that were there. Yeah. It wasn't just him.
So you're right. I was just going to agree with what you're saying. Like, you've got 4 other guys there on this fishing trip that could give the same account. Kind
of like Travis Walton, similar situation.
Yeah, a lot like that. Yeah.
But Bledsoe, it just keeps happening. It's not like that was just the tip of the iceberg. That just kind of awakened him to like, well, something strange is going on. I think he left that whole situation freaked out, not knowing exactly what it was. Then over time, they eventually reported it to MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network. Such a strange organization to exist, but it's true. Like it's where civilians report UFOs. I have a personal theory that I'm pretty sure it's like a controlled disinformation organization, but that's just
not
me.
A bad theory, yeah.
Well, I think it's that's based on my own personal experience with them.
Okay.
Did
you call them?
Yeah, when I saw a UFO for the first time, I reported it to MUFON because a buddy of mine told me I should. And I'll say this is what's strange about MUFON is I didn't really think much of it. And then like they emailed me back like a few days later, a very detailed report of like everything in the sky. They were like, there's this, like somebody took a lot of time to look into my case. Which I thought, my initial thought was like, I don't have time to do that.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Who has time to do this? And then even afterwards, they mailed me a handwritten letter thanking me for contacting them. And all of it was just like too much. It was like, who has time to do this? And that's when I thought like, so they were trying to tell me that what I saw was some satellite.
Okay.
And so I said, fair enough. I emailed him back and I said, well, if what I saw was that satellite, then it must be that lots of people see that. Do you know where I could see video of that from someone else witnessing that? And they're like, nothing. And I was like, well, okay, well, I'm pretty sure if what I saw happens all the time, then people would have video of it. Somebody would have video of it. Yeah. I think what I saw doesn't happen very often. I think they were disinformation, like trying to tell me, oh, you just saw a satellite. Don't worry about it.
I was listening to that Tucker Carlson interview that you sent to me, and the line came to mind just now where he made a real like quick comment about they're spooked enough to bother to lie about it.
Yeah.
So when you say like, well, they really put a lot of time into documenting all these things that were in the
It's
sky.
like I wouldn't have thought that much of it until they send me a handwritten
like,
Christmas card saying, "Thank you for contacting us."
Sort of like if your kids
call me if you see it again.
Yeah, you ask your kids if they broke the bowl on the kitchen floor, and then all of a sudden they've got a 30-minute story about everything they did to tell you how for sure it was not them, and you're like, boy, that was a lot of detail.
Well, I think that too, like this plays into the Bledsoe story, because I think he probably feels the same way, because he reported to them. I think that MUFON has a history of leaking stories to media, and then media kind of latching onto those stories, and they don't tell you they're going to do that. Like they don't. I think it helps. I don't know how it helps MUFON, but either way, I think that Bledsoe ended up. I forget who did the story on him, but like shortly after the first incident, they were featured on some network, Ancient Aliens or something like that. And it was the whole thing was set up to make them look stupid. Like the whole time they were interviewing them, they were thinking, oh, they take this seriously. It's going to be a whatever. And then when the actual show comes out, it made him look crazy, and they were really not happy about it. So Bledsoe himself was like, I think that played a role. He was for a while, like 5 or 6 years, he didn't want to have anything to do with it. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want anybody, because he was just like, all it's done is now my kids are getting made fun of, and the whole thing is ruined his life, but
that Bledsoe Said So podcast with the son, Ryan, I listened to episode 9, which has the transcript of the regression hypnosis.
Oh yeah.
From the documentary you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I believe it was Discovery Channel.
Yeah, that's right.
And Ryan Bledsoe says it's worth the time to watch the Discovery documentary, even though it's like
hatchet job.
The family the family considers it, like a smear piece. But I searched around for it for a brief moment. I didn't find it, but it sounds like it's available.
I know it is one of their episodes. The whole thing is on there.
Oh, okay, that's cool. But yeah, it's worth looking into. But I think the way you just described that is a more coherent way of explaining what happened to them. Because they're so close to it, I think there's still kind of hurt feelings about, you got this dad who wasn't really into aliens. He was in a vulnerable place to begin with the failing business, and, he's got a family to support. And then he has this encounter. He's sort of sheepish about sharing it with whoever the authorities are that he's supposed to share it with. He finally calls MUFON, and then things don't work out better for him.
Yeah.
Quite the contrary. Yeah. And
he got to the point where MUFON was contacting him because of this woman, Diana Pasulka, which I haven't quite finished this, but I'm not on the camera yet. I'll hold it up till they come on. But she wrote American Cosmic at the time. And this is her newest book called Encounters, which is really good. American Cosmic is fantastic too, but this is a great one. And so she is a professor of religion from North Carolina, not far from where the Bledsoes live. Actually, his son is like neighbors with her. Before all this happened.
Ryan is neighbors?
I believe so, yeah. And so before all of this went down, they happened to be just close to each other. Diana is studying religion, and through the process of that, studying UFOs and encounters and belief systems, all of that. Anyway, so MUFON contacts Chris Sr. and asks him to come to a conference that Diana is speaking at. And he goes, and he's speaking there too. And I guess somehow through those conferences, they met, but they didn't get a lot of chance to talk and to get to know each other. Long story short, eventually she contacts him and wants him to meet some of the people in her book. This is like back in 2012. The people, government insiders and NASA people that she's talking to that want to talk to him. And he doesn't want to talk to them. And and a big part of his story is he tells her, well, I got to back up. So before all that happened, one of the other major things that happened to him was he had an encounter with, he called the lady.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like Easter, I think. And this is, I don't know, probably back in 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. And he has an encounter at 3:00 in the morning. He's asleep. He hears a voice and it says, "Wake, arise," or something. He wakes up and there's like these 3 hooded figures in his room, according to him. And they take him out into the woods near his house, and he encounters, it's a long story. You can hear him tell it, but they give him some furry little critter.
That's right.
That he doesn't know what it is. And it's like, has no head and no tail. And it's like just spiky.
Yeah.
And it's like the size of like a big sausage. And it's like prickly. And they hand it to him and they say, "This is your burden," or this is for you, or don't lose this. And then they disappear. And then he's like,
he's just stuck with this porcupine
he doesn't know what to
thing.
do with it, but he's right next to his dog kennels.
Yeah.
So he takes it and he puts it in the dog kennels just so it doesn't get away, and he shuts the kennel. And then when he turns around, there's a tree in front of him. And I don't know if there was like a flash of light or something happens. And out of this tree jumps this gigantic 1,200-pound bull.
Yeah.
He sees this bull like just appear, and it charges him and just runs over him. And so he falls backwards, and he can see when he looks up, like he can see through the bull. It's like translucent.
Right.
And he's freaking out about the bull, and he's like trying to figure out what's going on. And he turns around, and then standing right in front of him is the lady. And it's this beautiful, he describes it as a fair-haired, white Roman dress, barefoot apparition of a woman hovering like 3 feet off the ground. And that kind of starts this whole, like, I don't know what you want to call it. Like, he was already on a journey, but it's like a little more directed at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If I recall, he was just like everybody else, unable to capture any of this stuff on video up to this point. And I think when he's talking to the lady, you know, she's saying it's your job to tell the world about us.
This. Yeah.
And he's kind of like, I think a lot of us would be, well, then let me get some pictures and stuff. Quit fouling up my equipment.
Because he had a camera where he had an orb he was trying to video, and it like fried the camera. But she, according to him, told him a lot of information that was going to, like prophetic stuff that was going to happen in the future. And it's really interesting because, I mean, since that incident, it is true that quite a few people from NASA, like serious people, started looking into his story and like coming, and they were wanting to study his brain, and they were going to talk to him. And one of them was Hal
Povenmire.
Yeah. Who is, if you look him up, he is a wacky guy, but he also was a NASA scientist who mapped the moon and did like a lot of like serious science stuff.
Yeah.
And so he had some wacky ideas, like many of the guys that we talk about, Jack Parsons and, you know, whoever might be. But there was a lot of people that are brilliant, but also have some pretty strange ideas.
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's a certain amount of alchemy to that. And I don't know if we were talking about it or if I was talking about it with somebody else, but yeah, to have a certain kind of genius, there's usually a certain amount of wackiness that is in there with it. And you're right. Parsons is a good example. But when I hear that this Hal Povenmire was kind of a character, I'm thinking, well, if he's as smart as he would have been working, you know, on mapping the moon and everything else, then he probably was a quirky dude. He probably didn't I think of, I used to play in a band with the guy they called Kid Prodigy. And the guy, I mean, he literally carried around like one of these little, like a little cardboard, like a notification for him to be able to play in bars because he was under 21.
Yeah.
His parents had signed it, but could play circles around everyone and do backflips while he was doing it. So he's like a pretty accomplished gymnast, amazing guitar player. He played in like a Queen tribute band that
Who's
like
his name? I know who
Brian Gresh.
Yeah.
He not just like any Queen tribute band like that you see at the bar.
Yeah,
but
like the
a
Queen tribute
like a
band.
national touring Queen tribute band. He played the Brian May parts. And when he's not doing that, he's a mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
Like, and I just played a gig with him a couple weeks ago, and he's kind of like, I haven't picked up the guitar for a few years, and he's still unbelievable. But I say all that to say, one of the first times I was at his house, we're going down to the basement to rehearse, and the banister's kind of loose. And he's like, oh, sorry, yeah, it's a little loose. My dad and I were trying to calculate our horsepower. And I was like, you what? And he and his dad had figured out the equation, the angle of the stairs and how quick they get up it. And they were trying to go faster and faster. And they were using the banister to like pull themselves up for more momentum to generate more horsepower. And I guess I say all that to say, this is when he was 17, he was doing that. And I just think that's not what I was doing when I was 17.
Yeah. Well,
so smart people do weird stuff in their characters.
He had a lot of guys like that I think legitimate, scientists, and that's kind of I don't know, that's a fact I don't think you can dispute. It's kind of like, okay, kind of quirky guy in the woods in North Carolina makes a lot of really wild claims about encounters, but the fact that all of these NASA scientists and people like Diana and the people that she interviewed in her book, and like they were all seriously taking an interest in him. And then some of that has to do, that was my point with the lady encounter. He has this encounter with this lady who tells him a lot of things that are going to happen and people he's going to meet, blah, blah, blah. And he's supposed to tell his story. And then he doesn't want to, except that she said at the time that she would guide him, that if he would do it, she would be there to guide him every step of the way. So anyway, Diana's trying to get him to talk to some of her people, and he doesn't want to do it. And then he says, if I'm supposed to do it, the lady will give me a sign. And it's like up to the night before this conference, these people are all going back to wherever they came from, and they're not going to get a chance to talk to him. And he's in his house, and outside of their house, it's like been raining. All of a sudden, there's a big tree out in front of their house that just explodes into flames, and they don't know what's going on. And they have video of this. He's shown. It's
when you're
wild.
talking about videos, that was the one that was the most captivating to me.
It looks like somebody poured a tank of gasoline inside this old tree and lit it on fire. Mm-hmm. And apparently it was flamed up. They don't know how it started on fire. It just started. And then they kept putting it out, and it just ignite back up. So it's a burning bush. It's where you're like, what is going on? So then, he called Diana and was like, I'll be there tomorrow. Like the next day, he's like, I'll be there. And I had a sign. Yeah. And so it's pretty wild. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to explain that, except one of the hard things about explaining Bledsoe is there's just so much to him. Like, it's not just he had this encounter. Yeah. He literally has 2,500 videos of orbs that have shown up. And when he talks about these encounters with his kids, like he would get the kids up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my gosh. He's talking about like 50-foot long orbs hovering over their house. Pretty strange. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, he faced a lot of backlash, and some of this I don't know if I disagree with. I mean, what exactly? He thinks that they're angels. He thinks that's what they are. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people in his church disowned him because they're like, it's demonic. You shouldn't be talking to these things. You should blah, blah, blah. But they healed him. That was another part of his story, is that he was very sick and they had this encounter, and then he was healed.
He was suffering from Crohn's disease pretty seriously. And then issues after that. Yeah,
his thought was like, well,
interaction.
If they're evil, why are they healing me? That doesn't make any sense. But they could still be evil if they're healing you, Chris. I'm just saying.
He's got accounts of, other people that have been around that have been healed from cancer and a few different things like that. That's funny. That crossed my mind too. He made the comment of, well, why would this happen or that? And I'm like,
I think, didn't Satan heal some people in the Bible too?
Well, if I were a deceitful person, I would do a lot of
Yeah,
things
yeah,
to
well-
make you think I was not.
I'm really torn because I don't know Chris, but like the answer of is this a good or a bad thing? I'm more inclined to say it's a bad thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm less inclined to say it's some benevolent force. But at the same time, part of what is that I find interesting is his encounter with the lady. And there's been more than one. And I don't know if you know, like in Catholic culture, that is that's a common thing for to not just any lady, but the Virgin Mary appearing in different points in human history since Christ's death. Do you know about any of that?
Nope.
Like, are you familiar with Our Lady of Guadalupe?
Yeah. I mean, I know the phrase. Our
Do you know
Lady
what that
of-
story is? Do you know anything
No,
about it?
I think I've seen pictures of it, but
This is any good Catholic would just know this story, but
sure.
it's a true story. I mean, as far as what happened from this story. So I don't remember what year it is. I know it's in Mexico. There's, an encounter a young boy has, like he's out in the countryside and he sees some, something that catches his attention, and eventually he has an encounter with who he perceives to be the Virgin Mary, an apparition of the Virgin Mary, beautiful, similar to how Bledsoe describes the lady, like beautiful, glowing woman, tells him, I want you to build a cathedral here. And I'm going to butcher this story, but some Catholic's going to comment about it, whatever. This is the broad strokes. Okay. Broad strokes. She says, build a church here. He goes back to the local bishop, and the bishop says, you're crazy, whatever. Tell her, if you're really seeing the Virgin Mary, bring me a sign. It's like the dead middle of winter. He goes back to the same spot, and I think there's a bunch of roses there. And the lady appears and says, take him all of these roses as a sign that this is true. And so he takes his Telma kind of like cloth thing, and he gathers up all of these roses, and he takes them to the bishop to show him, and he like lays them down at his feet, and everybody gasps, and he thinks they're looking at the roses. And then imprinted on the Telma, that image that you see of Our Lady of Guadalupe, that was imprinted on the cloth. And that's still in Mexico City. You can go see it today, and it's been studied by a lot of people. I mean, obviously there are people that will agree and disagree about it, but it's whether you could say it's some sort of hoax, you could say it's some sort of whatever, but the results of it are the mass conversion of the entire state of Mexico to Catholicism, like almost overnight.
So that was the catalyst for it.
Yeah, it was a big catalyst for it. I think a lot of people, it was like a lot of times that kind of conversion has to be accompanied by
usually it's some kind of an
conquering, imperial. Like a lot of people die to get you to become Catholic.
It's funny. That's exactly when you said, "Oh, that was a mass conversion," and that's exactly where my head went right away. It was like,
this was a mass conversion that no bloodshed happened, and that's kind of what's miraculous about it. That a lot of Mexicans really took their faith seriously based on this story. Anyway, that's kind of what I found interesting about it, because obviously, I don't think the Vatican has vetted or anyone has like studied Bledsoe's account, but it is like, well, this has happened before. Yeah. And also maybe he didn't know exactly, like maybe he's just interpreting it from a non-Catholic perspective. Sure, yeah, because he doesn't mean he wasn't talking to the Virgin Mary. Maybe he was.
Yeah. I mean, his background is more like Pentecostal, super Protestant.
So he wouldn't know what he's looking at.
Right.
But it's not just in Mexico. I mean, there's Our Lady of Fatima was in Portugal, similar kind of story. There's been a lot of them. So it's kind of makes you wonder, like, well, maybe he's also familiar with those stories and he kind of concocted this whole story to get attention.
Could be, yeah.
Or maybe throughout history, a beautiful lady appears and tells people things. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the Virgin Mary. Who he described didn't sound like the Virgin Mary because she had blonde hair.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound quite right.
I was listening to another interview today, and it was Chris and his son Ryan together. And they made the comment that these beings sometimes will appear like they're shapeshifter is not the word I'm looking for, but like he's perceiving it's possible he's perceiving the Virgin Mary with blonde hair instead of brown. Like, could be the same being showing up to him. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's that's where it's like demonic, maybe.
Yeah.
Where you're like, well, he's
This Pepsi
kind of
tastes
just
like Coke.
yeah. He's trying to get you to think a certain thing, and the idea that, well, Mary changes her appearance based on, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you change your appearance all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Jewish lady decides to look like a Swedish lady. Like, why would she do that?
Yeah.
I don't. Plus, Bledsoe's not Swedish, so I don't know.
He is Southern though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who knows if that actually I mean, I don't know if that happened. It's just part of his story. And his story is, but I do think it's interesting that it's not it seems like an isolated thing, but if you actually studied like apparitions of beautiful women appearing and giving prophetic messages to people, it's actually a pretty common thing in human history. It's not, especially in Christian history, like that has happened quite a bit, if you're talking about the Virgin Mary, and maybe that's something that was going on here. I don't know. It's a really hard, like, how do you verify a lot of this? It's like he has the orb thing. I get it. Like, he's got videos of orbs. I think orbs show up around his house. Mm-hmm. Is the government doing that, using him as a useful idiot, like kind of, tricking him into thinking he's seen orbs for some reason? Sounds like that's pretty elaborate hoax, but if it was, the lady appearing is kind of like, well, are you sure you weren't dreaming?
Right.
Because I've had a lot of dreams where I swear I was awake until you know what I mean? Like waking up and even thinking like, am I awake? Am I still asleep? Under a lot of stress, like who knows what the mind is capable of.
That's a big factor. Cause when he goes into some detail, especially in the Tinfoil podcast I listened to today, of what kind of state he was in at the time he had this first encounter. And you gave some description earlier, you're talking about failing business and,
He seemed to have spent most of his life in a pretty chaotic state.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Which
he
is fine, except you can't pretend like that wouldn't have an effect on your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
That's kind of what I thought. Is like, maybe you see orbs, but then a lot of this other stuff, like how sound is your mind? By his own admission, it's been a roller coaster from day one.
Right.
Doesn't mean he's mental. It just means, that might be a factor. I haven't studied his brain.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of curious what he was up to after, as far as what he was up to for a day job after, say, 2007.
I think he just kept doing the construction stuff.
Yeah, what I'm wondering is like, if I'm being more like on the skeptical side of it, I'm going, did he just kind of scrape by?
God, but then the kids, the damn kids, like, how do you explain that?
Well,
I guess you could brainwash your kids.
You could
get them to think something's real that's not. But they're not just like, oh, Dad told us this. They're like, oh no, Dad woke me up and there was a 50-foot orb in the backyard and we all saw it. And my friends saw it and it freaked us all out. And and NASA was there the next day. That Hal, what's his name? That was the point about him, is that he was for a long time basically, when they did Operation Blue Book, I think it was, like Bledsoe kind of thinks now that that's what his job was. Like he would go out and debunk a lot of these UFO things. So the reason he showed up at his front door was he was initially there to debunk what he was saying. And over time they befriended, and he didn't. He realized that he was telling the truth and that whatever had happened to him, it is what it is. Like they studied him because they were curious, like, why you? Like, why? What? And he even said something like that to him, like, why do they appear to you? We've been trying for 50 years to get these things to, to have some sort of control over when and where they show up, and they can't get their arms around it. Yeah, it's kind of how he said it. I think it's how he said it in the podcast. But why, Dave?
Well, one comment he made in the podcast I was listening to today was the people that he said he's shared these with.
It's a Conspiracy Dad podcast. You're in a safe place.
He said he shared these orbs with other people, and now like some people that they can see these orbs as well. But the comment that he, like the distinction that he made with people that can see these orbs on a regular basis versus those that can't, he said every one of them has had some kind of trauma. And so, we kind of gave the laundry list of, losing wife and business troubles and, almost getting, almost dying in a hunting accident, and then also having a lot of medical problems. He's had a lot to deal with. Like you said, life of chaos. He said all of these other people that he's, kind of shared this with, and that now they see orbs, they've lost a spouse or a child or something like that. So he seems, at least currently, seems to
interesting
think it's
study to
trauma-related.
do is like, has anybody with a completely normal, bland, mundane life seen a UFO? I mean, does anybody have that life? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a funny question.
I've had quite a bit of trauma in my life. I don't know. Maybe that plays a role in it. I mean,
Maybe,
that's
yeah.
a strange.
Yeah.
Why would trauma? It seems like I don't know how you would connect all that. I need to find somebody completely mundane. No, none of them see UFOs, do they? I ask them all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So the mundane people, they don't want to see them.
Nah. Well, and it's funny you say that, because when he mentioned that, I thought, yeah, careful what you wish for. Like, do you have to go through something terrible to open yourself up to
I think that's kind of
supernatural like that?
I think he kind of has that take on it too. Like, yeah it's not pleasant, you know. It's been a rough ride. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's the Bledsoe what are we doing? Like a 45-minute explanation of the Bledsoe story. Is there other stuff that I'm missing that you want to touch on?
You laid out, I mean, almost every bullet point that I had jotted down. You hit all of them. I was kind of dismissive about how nonlinear his story is I would say if you're going to check out the Danny Jones interview, that is the most in-depth and the most long form. Take it in chunks, because it kind of goes all over the place. But even when you and I were just discussing this, it's like, boy, there's just so much and it's so broad. Like, I tried to put some of this in chronological order, and it's difficult to do because there are so many things to cover.
And he's still out there. Like I said, go on to his Instagram, follow him. He sits out on his back porch like every other night, and he just summons these orbs to show up. From what I've read, I don't know if that's a good idea. It's funny. There was a video that popped up on my Twitter. I don't think I sent you Tom DeLonge talking about the bugs.
No, I don't think I saw that one.
This was back from, I think it was a Jimmy Church interview from like years ago. But it's funny. I find myself agreeing with Tom on things quite often. Not saying I agree with everything he's saying in it, but like his take on it. Like he basically was saying like, people are, he's describing what is going on. And he's saying that, people are watching these programs like Ancient Aliens, and these people that are getting these bizarre, theories that aliens are everything. Aliens built everything. Aliens made everything. And they're really worshiping these aliens. And then he stops. It's really disturbing because he's like, people need to understand it's not good. Like, he's like, just get over it. Like, aliens being like, he's like, the whole subject, he's like, it's not good. It's bad news. Okay. And, the idea that they're, that everything is aliens benevolent. He's like, it's, I've been told that's not the case. And it's really,
that's Bledsoe's take, is kind of like, no, don't be scared.
He's really like, they're here to help us. And
we're coming up on a real good
Tom
time.
DeLonge, I'm not saying that Bledsoe or DeLonge is correct. I'm just saying the opposite opinions. Tom's opinion is no, like he said basically when he was briefed on the subject, he said he didn't sleep for 3 nights. Mm-hmm. He said it's a disturbing thing to come to realize. And, I think I'm somewhere in the middle where I'm like, okay, I've seen some UFOs. I wasn't traumatized by it. I wasn't scared. I just saw lights in the sky and it was kind of weird. And that was it. I think I probably saw orbs. It sounds a lot like what Bledsoe said he saw. But then Tom's whole take on it, there's part of me that's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm the whole Independence Day kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just, I'm not going to automatically say something's benevolent just because I don't have the information. All I have is a light in the sky. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to laser and kill me,
Right. Yeah.
or if it's here to give me the keys to the universe. But I don't know, the way that we treat lower organisms is
Right. Yeah.
gives me pause to say, well, maybe
Absolutely, yeah.
it's not benevolent. And I think too that crack in the Great Wall book, he clearly demonstrates that the majority, if not almost all of the alleged alien encounters are definitely not positive. And it's definitely people being violated and injured. And it's not anything that you could look at and say, sounds like a fun time to me.
Sign me up.
Like, Travis Walton has come around,
Yeah.
but initially, he was traumatized deeply. And, just, we don't need to turn them into our gods. That's what I guess.
Yeah,
And I think Tom was kind of saying that, like,
Yeah.
just starting to worship, these aliens. It's weird because I think his position is like, he's like, oh no, God is real. God does exist and love. And like, he has like this real, probably kind of agnostic, but like he does believe in God. And he's very clear about, and the aliens are not God. So the people that are turning them into like God, the same thing, probably not the right take. And I agree with that. I don't think they're God. I mean, it's a stretch to like look at something you don't understand and then immediately turn it into a deity. Be like, wow, there's this, whatever it is. Like, I've never seen that. Let's worship it.
Well, but that's not that. I mean, I do think it's a bad idea, but it's not a hard leap for people to make. There's a bigger thing than me that I don't understand. It's got to be a deity.
Yeah. That's the premise of that.
Yeah.
What I'm working on
Yeah.
is that's it's a human nature. It's in our nature, whether it's on a local level of you walk into a room and they, everyone's wearing the same uniform.
Yeah.
And you feel like you want to be a part of this club, to, when you're suffering some great tragedy and you just, fall to your knees and look to the sky. And it's like, it's human nature to believe in something greater than ourselves. And, God knows that, but Satan knows that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that you could easily be drawn away from God to worship God knows what, just because it's our nature. I mean, to do it, walk into a room where everyone's dressed different than you and you feel it pulling on you. Like,
for sure. Yeah.
Or, if you've ever been a part of like a band, you get in a band and it's like you belong and you have this place and you're part of something. It's greater than you,
Yeah.
Play a gig by yourself.
Yeah.
Then go play a gig with your 5 best friends. And you just can't even compare. Which do you want to do?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
my take. Is that about wrap it up?
Yeah. As far as Bledsoe's concerned,
You have
I
a
think
dad
it
hack
does.
for us?
What was the one I had? I did have one and now I've forgotten it. Man. I don't know if we've talked about doing well. Okay, yeah, no, I got it. It's back. Here we go. We may have talked about doing crazy stuff in front of your kids just so they think that anything can happen. Well, there's
Not that one.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get into that as well. But specifically, I was thinking of Kokomo. We were talking about this concept of like you have to do things to make your kids think you're a little crazy. And like Kokomo was like, yeah, one time I threw a laptop out the window of my car just to show them like I'll do anything. Not long ago, my son he wanted to let me know that he was not going to wear jeans to church. He was going to wear whatever he wanted. So I decided you are going to wear jeans, but before that, you're going to unload my car. And it was just like a silly, like I never make him unload my music equipment, but today it was raining and you're being kind of a brat. And if you think that you're not in, or if you think you're in charge in this house, then
you're not.
Think again. So
I think it's a lot of dad is just making sure they know they're not in charge.
Totally. Yeah. So that was my favorite punishment I've doled out in a while, was watching him unload my gear in the rain. So there's a quick little dad hack for you. But then I mentioned that to my brother, and he said to one of his buddies who's a dad, this is the actual dad hack. If you're going to be doing some remodeling around the house, don't tell the family. I mean, the wife can know, but don't tell your kids. And just start tearing the house up. Tear the doors off the walls. Whatever you need to do the demo on.
And you just punch a hole through the
just
wall.
tear. And he said, he said his buddy was going to be replacing doors. So he just tore doors off of doorways and let his kids think that he was nuts.
The Hulk.
Yeah. And he didn't, I don't know to this day if he ever explained like it was time.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So that's it. The premise is you need to do something to make your kids think you're a little bit crazy. But practical application is if you happen to have a home remodeling job coming up, that's a good opportunity to use that trick.
That's a good opportunity.
Yeah.
I guess mine would be, we were talking about cigars on the way up. You tell that story about your son. To bring people up to, I left some cigars at a party and you were there and I was like, hey, Dave, grab the cigars for me before you go. Yeah. So you had a big thing of my cigars.
I had like a brick of them.
Like a brick of them sitting in your house. And this was your son's natural reaction to seeing these cigars.
What is this? And I was like, oh, these are Dante's cigars. I got to take them back to his place. You should throw them away, because we're indoctrinated to think that sugar is okay, but tobacco is bad. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. They're his, for one. And then, like I mentioned to Dante, I was like, and I happen to like one every now and again, too. But, yeah, I don't smoke in front of my kids. So, yeah, you were saying.
Well, I made that decision years ago. Part of me was just like, okay, when the kids are younger, every now and then my buddies would come over. We'd smoke cigars, maybe once a month. I don't know, not very often. Yeah. Every now and then we'll smoke a cigar, and then it just got me really thinking about because then you start to hide it from the kids the older you get. Yeah. And I just thought, this is my house, this is my family. And I'm not going to let some Ronald Reagan anti-drug program dictate the way that I act in my house right now. Yeah. And I was no big deal. What are you doing? I'm smoking cigars in the backyard with my buddy.
You're doing something totally legal. There's not wrong.
There is nothing wrong with it. I know many doctors who smoke cigars. It's like the idea that and I could tell the first couple of times they would come out, fire pits going, and they'd see there's a little bit of what's going on?
Am I supposed to see this?
You just take a big drag and blow it in their face. you just be yourself. I just think that we should get back to more of that. Yes, smoking cigarettes is bad for you, but where is the prudence? Why can't people just, you know what I mean? It's no, it's not crack cocaine. It's not.
Right, yeah.
As much as the world wants you to think it is. I have smoked or used tobacco products since I was under 18. And I have never been addicted to them, ever.
Yeah.
I'm not saying other people do, obviously, but I don't know. It felt weird to me to be like, damn it, I'm not hiding anything from my kids. Mm-hmm. Yes, I smoke cigars. So what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe that's a good litmus test for what you're doing is you should be able to do stuff in front of your kids. Now, I mean, you don't want your kids using bad language at school, so keep an eye on what you're watching. I cuss
in front of my kids all the time.
Now, having said that, I swear in front of my kids.
But they know they're not supposed to say it.
But I also don't swear all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So
I think it's actually really funny when toddlers cuss. I think it's cute. When they say "damn it," it is so funny.
Funny, yeah.
So, I don't know. The cigars, I think, obviously if you don't like cigars, but if you like cigars and you're a dad, grow a pair, walk into the backyard, light up a cigar and smoke it. And if your kids see you, who cares? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. They know more about you.
Yeah.
Because one day they're going to smoke cigars.
Right. It might not be the worst thing for them to see a healthy relationship with something like cigars be modeled for them.
They're not good for you, but neither is a cheeseburger. So.
And that's, when we were talking about it earlier, I just thought, we buy our kids Sour Patch Kids all the time.
Yeah, literally that pantry's full of
just garbage.
Like, nothing good for
and
my
we're
kids.
getting
and
all
you're worried
worked up about a cigar
tobacco.
every now and again. Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. This has been the Conspiracy Dad podcast. And if you like the show, please like, subscribe, share. We will see you guys next time.